Welcome to the CMO Spotlight, and I'm so excited to have this conversation today with Dan Csont, who is the EVP and Chief Marketing Officer of Corpay. Welcome, Dan.
Thank you very much. Great to be here.
Oh, well, I'm so happy to have this conversation with you, as mentioned, and I want to start by if you could just tell us a little bit about Corpay. I know y'all recently went through a rebrand. You were FleetCor for many years, and you became Corpay. So if you could just tell us a little bit about the company. What does the company look like?
Sure. Yeah, sure. First, at the umbrella level, it's a business payments company. And basically what that means is across a whole variety of mediums, we digitize and make payments easier for mostly companies, B2B. The company itself has a very interesting history, though, in that just a little over 20 years ago, it was a $25 million company losing money, and now it's a $4 billion S&P 500 company.
Wow.
And it just doesn't happen very often. The primary mode of growth, well, big part of the growth has been acquisitions. But the interesting thing is, as everyone knows, acquisitions is an easy way to grow until the acquisition doesn't work. But in this case, the combination of all these acquisitions have been integrated in a way that has just continued to propel the company. And so now at 4 billion, we have a very different perspective on growth, much more organic growth now because we have a lot of assets to grow from. At 25 million, you just don't have much. So it's been a very interesting ride. And the other fascinating thing about it is the company has gone through cycles in the 20 years that most larger companies go through over a course of maybe 50 years, where the company started small and it was entrepreneurial, and then it had a couple big breaks and grew and became like a real company and had to hire people and create HR processes and things like that. And then it grew into a big company, and then it grew into a behemoth company, $4 billion, pretty good size S&P 500 company. And through those phases, it's been interesting to look at and learn about from people that have been here, the different challenges. So many different challenges. Now, at this size, the big challenge is, like most large companies, is growth. And when you're growing at a rate like we are, compounded, just in the last 4 years since I've been here, we've added $1 billion in growth. When you're growing at that level, the law of large numbers catches up with you, and it just gets harder and harder to grow.
Right.
And you need bigger swings at the plate. And so the exciting thing about being here is finding those swings at the plate that can really pay off. So that's kind of a quick kind of summary of the company itself.
I love that. If you also, I mentioned the rebrand, and I know that
Yes.
as FleetCor, it was all about just fleet management. It was
Yes.
kind of a credit card for truckers that would use that to pay for their gas, that kind of thing. And I know that Corpay is a lot more than that, as you mentioned,
Yes.
getting from 25 million to 4 billion. So just for a minute, I mean, if you could explain, well, what was the purpose of the rebrand to go from FleetCor?
Sure.
It sounds like because FleetCor didn't represent what the company did. It only represented one little part of what the company did. Right?
That's exactly right. So for the first 10 years, the company was what's called a fleet card company or a fuel card company. We're selling fuel cards and fuel card management systems, digital systems, to companies that had large fleets. And basically in the last 10 years, it's evolved into much more. Corporate payments, travel payments, international payments. Like the scale is now so much broader. And so the unique thing about my role and this rebrand was, my boss and I talked about this when I came on board over 4 years ago. On, hey, the company now looks a lot different than it did, yet it's carrying this moniker of FleetCor. Fleet is only a portion of the business, an important portion of the business. But the interesting thing is the company goes to market with a lot of different brands, much like most B2B companies. And so the idea was, does FleetCor really represent who this company is? And so we've been on a journey the last 4 years, which culminated in a huge drum roll moment just in March this year, where we rebranded the whole company, changed the name, changed the stock ticker symbol, who we are, our entire investor presentation, meaning how we talk to investors, how we talk to customers. And probably the biggest component, which I did want to emphasize about any rebrand, is the employee dimension. Think
Right.
about 20 years of adding companies and integrating businesses, and how many different identities people had, or brands
Mm-hmm.
they had to identify with. And so the concept here was to also win over employees with a brand that they could look at and be proud of.
Mm-hmm.
One name, one brand, and that's Corpay, which represents much more of who we are today, which is more of a corporate payments oriented company. So those are all three of those dimensions, I think, are really important, because employees as a dimension is
Yeah.
absolutely critical, especially hiring people and developing people. You want them to feel like they're part of an organization they can be proud of. So anyway, that's kind of the rebrand in a nutshell. A lot of work, but a
Yeah.
very exciting moment. Thank God the stock traded the day after we rebranded, because that was my biggest concern. When you change your
Right.
ticker
Right.
symbol, the last
To
thing
screw
you
something up.
want
Right.
is people go in to buy the stock and they can't. So that would
Right.
have
Right.
been
Right.
not good for Dan. And anyway, that was a quite a moment, but yeah, very very exciting time.
Well, and so you kind of referenced, the employee component of this. I'm curious. So, as EVP and CMO of the company, maybe talk about your team. You don't have,
Sure.
not specifics, but like what are the groups of marketing entities that fall
Sure.
within your purview?
Yeah, sure, for sure. Well, first of all, I'm in the 20-year history, I was the first CMO,
Hmm.
corporate CMO. So up until the 4 years ago when I joined, which was two of the big reasons I joined the company, just from a journey perspective, were these two things. First, to rebrand a company this size is a very unique challenge that
Yeah.
people don't get in a career. And the second was to build an organization essentially from scratch, and put it together and have it move in one direction. And so I was the first CMO in the history of the company, and the challenge was an interesting one. So we have about 280, close to 300 people doing marketing across the globe, but they're all in different pockets, and again, identify with different brands and different businesses. And so part of my job was to come in and kind of unify that, to bring those pieces together, because marketing is done better when it's done en masse.
Mhm.
Having a bunch of people in different areas not communicating with each other does not result in very good marketing.
Mhm.
It is a collaborative function, and having collaboration is just it's absolutely critical. So that was one of the other big challenges of this role, both building a corporate team, and which I'll talk about in a second a little bit more, as well as integrating the business unit teams to feel like they're more part of a bigger entity. So one of the things we did is we put CMOs. We have new CMOs, one incumbent and all new CMOs across our business units. And that business unit CMO role is such a critical one, because they have to work, they have to sit at the table at the business unit level, but they have to be connected back to corporate through the brand. And so setting that up was really critical. And then now, what I'll talk about for a second is the corporate group. I've been lucky enough in my career to be a CMO both at a business unit level and a corporate level. And I'll tell you that most folks in a business unit, they look at corporate as, hey, we're from corporate and we're here to help. And they just kind of, snicker. But my model is a little bit different, and folks will, some of the folks on this team would definitely reinforce this. This is a collaborative model that we've built. So basically what I've done at the corporate levels, I've built a small team of about 12 people, and I've picked four functions that lend themselves to some corporate level involvement at the business unit level. brand obviously being one of them. And what I've done is I've brought in very high caliber folks and built teams under them to work in collaboration with the business units. And if they don't add value, they tell me, and I'm going to pull them out. Like this isn't a, hey, we're going to go tell you what to do model because we're from corporate. It's a, hey, we've got a lot of experience and let's make you believers that, hey, we can help you. And the way you judge success with a model like this is the polarity. At first, you're going to them and kind of showing, hey, this is how we can help you. But fairly soon after that, they should be pulling you in. And that's when you know you're successful, rather than the corporate team going in and saying, hey, we want to help you with your PR, or we want to help you with your insights and understanding your customers better and your data better. Them saying, wow, these guys are good, and let's pull them in. We need them to be a part of what we're doing. And that's really where we are today, which is I think a huge accomplishment. It's an exciting accomplishment for me because that was my vision coming in, and it takes time. It's not an easy thing to build. You have to have credibility, you have to have trust, and they have to believe that you're not going to run back to corporate headquarters and take credit for their work, and
right.
all the things that human nature drives us to feel about these types of organizational structures. And so, yeah, we feel pretty proud of it. So anyway, that's the team. So it's business unit marketing of about 250 or 280 or so people, and then a corporate group that's about 12 and roughly 300 in total.
Wow. Yeah. Well, in a restaurant, QSR environment, it's like store support center, or Home Depot. At the Home Depot, it's called the Home Depot headquarters is called the store support center. So it's almost like your marketing team, your corporate marketing team is the store support center for all
Yes.
of the business level marketers.
Yeah, and if you think about it, at a business unit level, it's hard to have the scale to bring in a lot of high-powered talent because you just don't have the money. But at the corporate level, I can justify it because they're going to support multiple groups.
Right.
So I can hire higher caliber folks who can then work with them, and then ultimately, in some cases, they become those business unit CMOs, and you can have flow back and forth. We've had a good amount of flow between this corporate group and the business unit groups, both directions. And that's, again, creating an org model based on collaboration and trust. One of the elements, one of the proof points, besides, as I mentioned, the polarity element, is really the mobility element. Are people wanting to move between the groups? Is there interest? Do they feel connected? Those are key things. If they don't, and you don't get anyone moving, it's kind of a sign you may not be doing it right.
Yeah. Okay. So I want to talk really briefly just about your career path, because you've worked with some amazing companies on some amazing brands. So University of Buffalo undergrad, and then you came down to Atlanta for graduate school at Georgia State University. And then I think you started at PwC, and then Cisco Systems, and then AT&T, and then a bunch of years at Equifax, and eventually ended up at Delta Airlines right before Corpay. So if you can give us a couple of the highlights and maybe things along the path as you made that career journey to where
Sure.
you're doing it
Yeah.
today.
Yeah, for sure. I guess the first thing is I have a kind of an interesting background in that when I came out of college, or when I was in college, the country was in a recession. There weren't a lot of jobs, and I was in the business school. I thought, the public accounting firms, they hire every year, and I grew up in a very, very blue collar environment. I wanted a job, and so I got an accounting degree and went to PricewaterhouseCoopers, and got my CPA, which was not the easiest thing to do. But what I would tell most people from a career advice perspective is it doesn't really matter where you start. It's what you do with the components as you go through your career. Um, a CMO having a CPA and starting off as an accountant doesn't sound very intuitive, but I'll be honest, what it did is it showed exactly what I didn't want to do. I realized pretty quickly that I didn't want to keep score. I wanted to put points on the board. I wanted to be at the front
Hmm.
of the business, not the back office.
Yeah,
And
yeah, yeah.
sometimes learning that direct by doing it is actually very helpful because you're like, oh no, I don't want to ever do that. I don't want to ever do that again. So that's kind of a piece of career advice I would give people. But yes, as I moved through my career, I got deeper and deeper into the marketing function. The other thing I would just mention, and then I'll kind of touch on just a couple things from some roles. I think it's really important for people to view their career in building blocks and try to fill in as many blocks as
Yeah.
possible to create a strong foundation. Some people I've noticed over the years, if they get promoted too quickly or they get too single threaded, then they aren't able to expand and do more things. And you can build a bigger house on a bigger foundation. So the more jobs you can do in a younger age, when it's easier to move around between roles and get experience, whether it's promotion or whether it's lateral, that I believe really sets you up for later in your career to do bigger, broader roles. And I don't know that everybody always sees that. They kind of want to reach the brass ring as fast as possible
Hmm.
early in their career. And I guess someone gave a mentor gave me some advice a long time ago that maybe it was a little late, but I guess it was early enough, was, that a career is a marathon, not a sprint.
Hmm.
And it really is true. You do need to think of it over a period of time rather than just running after things over and over. And so uh, maybe by accident, maybe some by strategic, I was able to do a lot of different roles early in my career, especially at AT&T, that then set me up to have broader roles and bigger teams later. I think the second thing I mentioned about my career, and that or the second thing I want to mention about my career, I kind of touched on it a minute ago, is I would also give people advice that try to see as many things as you can,
Hmm.
whether it's different companies or different areas within companies, and and try to get experience at a corporate level as well as at a business unit level, or in the trenches as much as possible, because it pays so many dividends later when you've kind of seen both sides of the equation, and it gives you some credibility as you move through your career. Um, I guess the last thing I'd say is, yeah, I've been very lucky to work with some incredible companies and some incredible brands. Certainly Delta Airlines falls into that category. Love the company, love the brand, and it was an amazing experience. But the thing I got most out of that, and then I'll talk about the transition to Corpay, is a company that size is scale. I was able
Hmm.
to
Yeah.
pick up how to do things at a big scale. Sometimes, initiatives are more specific and they take focus, but at the end of the day, sometimes you just got to go big. And launching something like launching a new product or launching a campaign that covers a big scope is much more complicated than something that's narrow. And so again, good to get experience in that on that front. So I'd say that's one of the biggest things that I got from Delta. But the shift to Corpay really was, again, this unique opportunity to take a company um, and build both a function from scratch as well as rebrand a whole company from top to bottom. So that was really that was the progression to where I am today.
Love it. So I believe everybody has a superpower, and I'm curious what you think your superpower might be.
Interesting. I've asked a lot of people this question over the years, but I don't get it that much. So
Yeah.
it's one of the things I ask. I ask in interviews as well. Yeah, I would say with me, it's relationships and collaboration, which really the two things are very linked. Um, I've spent a lot of time figuring out how to work successfully with different people and work collaboratively across different types of folks, and really learning how to, there's a lot more to this than just a few words. The word collaboration is such a general term, like many business oriented words,
Hmm.
but really what it's about is really understanding what makes people tick, learning about people and then understanding how they're going to interact together rather than going in with, hey, this is my style and I'm going to do it my way and everyone's just going to kind of come along for the ride. I've been a part of many teams that had leaders like that. And I realized that's not that number one, that's not me. And number two, that's not the environment I want to work in. Sometimes it's effective because you can get things done, but you leave a lot of debris on the side of the road. And sometimes,
Yeah.
you pick an idea, get behind it, push everybody, and it's the wrong idea. So to me, collaboration is really about hearing everyone's voice. It's about art, orchestrating how people can work together on a team and emphasizing people's strengths, giving them the pieces that emphasize their strengths and others their strengths. And that's really the key to I think the superpower.
Awesome. Well, that leads me really nicely to a question that I'm curious if there's some values that you either want to demonstrate as a leader, or maybe these are values that you would demand from people that would work on your team.
Yeah, I'll tell you, I think this is one of the most important things you can get established as a leader. And I also think that consistency when you do have these is important. I would just point out three, and I'll kind of talk about each one a little bit. I think trust is probably the most important one. Building trust at every level is I think critical to to getting things done. The second is respect. Both getting the respect of folks that are more senior to you, as well as building respect with folks that you work with or work for you. And then the last one is really integrity, doing things the right way. And integrity is another one of those words like collaboration that people say, okay, it's kind of table stakes, but I view it a little bit differently. It's not just not doing bad things. It's having integrity in the way you approach things and expecting it from the people that work with you and for you. And it really works with trust. Do you trust these folks, and do you trust them to make decisions that are going to have integrity? That's how these values to me work together and help both a leader and a team.
That's awesome. So here at Setup, we're marketing matchmakers, and that often means we connect brands and marketing agencies together. And so we don't live on the client side as a brand, and we're not on the agency side either. We live in that space in between. So we're students of that agency client relationship, and we study it quite a bit. So I'm curious, either at Corpay or maybe in one of your previous stops, just generally, how do you think about marketing agencies or like to work with marketing agencies?
Sure. Yeah, for sure. And the first dimension of it is the nature of the company that you work for. Different types of companies have different styles, and the size of the company in some cases is pretty important. Back to I mentioned before about scale. When I was at Delta, to execute something internally, I did have an internal agency, if you will, from a creative and an ad development, those types of things. But there was no way to do things at that scale without external agency help.
Right.
There just wasn't. Now, a company like Corpay is a little bit more nimble and a little bit quicker and in many different markets and in a B2C environment, which is a much more, I would say it's a deeper knowledge you have to have of the business than in consumer. B2C is usually much bigger scale, and B2B is a little bit deeper and more complex. So working with agencies in a company in an environment like this is more, they need to add value to the specific initiative or the specific thing you're hiring them for. For example, when we did the rebrand, we hired an agency to help us develop our logo and help us develop our brand guidelines. We worked with them. We didn't give them the task and then they came back with the result. It was
There was no
a
black. There was no black box where you sent them off into
correct,
the corner
correct.
and then they came back. Poof! Here it is.
They
It
were an
was a collaborative
extension of
effort.
our, yes, they were an
Mhm.
extension of our team. And I think, sometimes an agency setup is the best when they are an extension of the
Right.
team
Right.
versus, you brief them, they go away and they come back and they say poof, and but that's
Yeah.
how a lot of these work. And again, in some companies that's necessary because, for example, a company that doesn't have the internal resources, they have to very much depend on an agency to do a lot of the work and to be a bit of a black box. But in this particular case here, we like to work collaboratively with them, and they're kind of an extension of the team. So to answer your question, I think it depends on the company
Yeah.
and the model, but agencies are extremely helpful for a company for many, many reasons. Certainly the expertise they bring, the resource capability that's, happens immediately versus hiring people, the knowledge, both of the whole industry as well as, past clients. And there's so
Right.
many times that I ask an agency, hey, we're living in our thing every day, but you see lots of these. Like, what's your thought on it? To me, an agency bringing that kind of intelligence to the table is incredibly helpful for a company where we're more on our thing every day.
Yeah. Well, we often say that sometimes you work with an agency for in ex increased capacity, like you just don't have enough arms and legs to do the things you're trying to accomplish, or capability. Hey, we're great at these 10 or 15 things, but there's these other two or three things that it's never going to be worthwhile for us to build that capability in-house. We'd rather have external expertise. So to that point, I'm curious if there are certain disciplines of marketing that you feel are core to the business and we should own them as in-house functions? And are there certain other ones where you almost always would get some external perspective? Like you mentioned the rebrand. Hey, we wanted somebody that's a branding expert to help us
Yes.
through the
Yes.
logo and the color palette and all other stuff. Are there certain things you feel like should be in-house and certain things that should generally be external?
For sure. Yeah. I think it's a great question. And I definitely do. So I think the it's a little bit of a continuum on things that are more corporate versus very business specific. So something like, data and CRM management, data management and insights and analytics for a business, understanding the mechanics of their customers and those types of things. That's a tough thing for someone to come in and do from the outside. And it's a tough thing to add a lot of value to because everybody's systems and customer structures are very different. So that would be an
Right.
example of, well, maybe arms and legs could help, like
Yeah.
smart talent, but it's just not as useful. I would say demand gen, can lend itself to external help, but more advisory than really being able
Right.
to get
Right.
in and roll your sleeves up and help. And then, of course, that shifts to the other side, which is the more strategic or more corporate type functions like a brand, as you mentioned, where, you want to understand what lots of people are doing
Right.
to then apply it to what you might do, or you want examples of, I mean, we had to look around and find, what are other companies that have actually done something like this,
Right. Right. Right.
and having somebody come in and say, hey, okay, go do the research on that. That was very helpful. PR is another one that's super helpful to have agency help with. So I would say it really depends on the function,
Yeah.
but it's a continuum.
Well, and some companies have a massive internal team on purpose, and some companies intentionally have a lean internal team because they want external. And I think to your point, what's right for Delta or Equifax is probably very different, and what's different for Corpay or any other company. Each company has, I'd say, a different Nirvana ecosystem,
Yeah,
right?
that's actually a
Yeah.
good way to put it.
Yeah. Okay. So I'm going to shift gears a little. I'm just curious, as marketers, we often are tasked with working with the non-marketing functions of organizations. There's the CFO, the CEO, and other groups of the C-suite. And I think often some of those folks think think themselves, amateur marketers or something. So I'm curious, how do you how do you demonstrate the value of marketing to the
Yeah.
non-marketing functions? And you know, it's easy for lead gen and measurable. It's harder for things like brand health and things that are a little fuzzier than something like how many leads did we generate. So I'm curious how you demonstrate the
Yeah.
value of marketing to the non-marketing functions.
It is actually a very, very good question,
Hmm.
and one that if you can't figure out the answer to as a CMO, you're not going to get much done. Especially the CFO. I mean, there's just no way, or the CEO. I
Right.
mean, there's just no way you're going to get anything done. You can be the most brilliant person in the world, but if you don't know how to navigate and sell internally to get things done, you're not going to go anywhere.
Yeah.
I think at the foundational level, I'll answer the question more specifically, but at the foundational level, one of the things that's important in this is trying to establish credibility and trust, because marketing is a function that doesn't lend itself in many cases to be real quant. There's a qual side of it. Now
Yeah.
you can triangulate with quant to get to qual and those types of things, depending on the function. But at the end of the day, marketing is not, tracking sales. It's not going to
Yeah.
have those kind of numbers. And people like CFOs and COOs, they like things that are very quant based because
Right. Right.
they're
Right.
easy to see. So I would say the first element is the relationship development and the credibility and
Yeah.
trust. If a CFO knows you seem to know what you're doing and you've done it at other places, and you can kind of point to that, that's going to give you kind of the first step. Now, it's not going to give you where you want to be, but at least it creates the environment with a CFO where then you can focus on, okay, let me help you understand how other companies have solved something like this and what other companies are going through and what our competitors are doing and how they're going through this before you get to here's the business case and here's what I'm trying to do. Um, Fear of competitors and market is an important driver of getting programs. I mean,
Hmm.
let's face it, if you can
Yeah.
show that either competitors are doing something that you want to do, or that there's an opportunity that you can prove is there that no one's doing, that can be, a big driver of
Hmm.
of gaining that credibility and getting that thing through. The last thing though is probably the most important is, and this is where I'm actually really glad that I had the CPA in my background, because
Right.
no matter what function you're in, and I would tell people, coming up through their career this emphatically, I've seen this evolve since I started my career over the last almost 30 years. Every function has become more quant.
Right.
Every function has become more focused on results. It's become an efficiency thing over the years. It's become a data thing. There's more big data. There's more AI. There's just more quant there, and there's more digital so that you can pull things out of systems, and there's just a lot more there. And so every function has become somewhat quant based or heavy quant based, and marketing is another one of those. So I would say having either you or someone on your team that is a quant based person is an absolute essential ingredient for any CMO today.
Yeah.
You have to have a good data person, and you have to understand analytics, whether it's you understanding it or people on your team and filtering it up to you. And then probably the most important thing is you need to be able to articulate that in a roundtable environment with your peers. So
Yeah.
I will tell you, a CEO and a CFO are definitely hard people to convince of things, for sure, in the marketing realm. But the hardest one probably is business unit presidents,
Mm.
because they literally are where the rubber meets the road. And the business case that you may have and the quant that you bring to the table, they're the ones that generally have to actually produce it. Like it, or what you're saying you can produce with the program rolls into their numbers ultimately and their compensation.
Yeah.
And so winning over the business unit first, or the businesses first with your program, and then getting it to the CFO and CEO is usually a really good formula for success, rather than the other direction, the
Yeah.
tops down direction. So anyway, does that answer your question?
Yeah, I love it. I love it. So, okay, I'm going to wrap things up with some non-marketing related questions just for fun. These are kind of rapid
Okay.
fire. So the first is there a quote or a book or a movie or a band or a sports team that inspires you? And what is it about that thing that inspires you most?
Wow, that's a really good question. I would say I'm going to go the band route, and I'm going to say you too,
Hmm,
and for some very specific reasons. So they're first of all they're probably my favorite band of all time. But the as a marketer, the thing that amazes me about them and that inspires me is they've been around since the mid 70s, and they have changed, they've evolved their brand and who they are and their music 4 or 5 times,
oh yeah.
and yet they are still U2. And so somehow they've been able to move through the 80s and still be popular, and move through
Yeah,
the 90s and still move through the 2000s. There's not many bands that have done that. You've got these bands like the Stones and Eagles that have been around a long time, but they've not evolved through every decade.
right.
And to be able to do that and almost reinvent themselves each time, but still have a common sound is I think inspiring. So anyway, that's how I would answer that one.
If you listen to their early albums and you listen to their most recent albums, it definitely sounds like two totally different bands. And not just
Totally.
because they're, Bono's voice has gotten, more mature over the years. It's just generally, you're right. They've reinvented themselves several times in terms of the overall sound and their look and everything, and the way they style their shows, has changed quite a bit over the years. Um, that's a great example. And as a marketer, that'd be a fascinating case study to watch their evolution over time.
It
Because,
really, it really is. It really struck me because I was in Vegas a few months ago where I saw them at the Sphere,
oh wow, cool.
and it was probably the most compelling, amazing show I've ever seen in my life. Not only being U2, but the experience there is absolutely amazing. But what struck me is the the Sphere is an amazing digital display it's absolutely incredible.
Yeah.
But no matter how amazing that was, the band that was there was better. And
Hmm.
so, I feel like a lot of the talent these days needs all the effects and the
Right.
blitz to kind of cover up that they're really just kind of okay.
Yeah.
And this was the other way around. This was just an amazing sounding group who also had this incredible
Yeah.
rapper around it. And that just it kind of struck me as wow, that's success.
Yep. Okay. So my last question is, other than your family, which is kind of an obvious answer, and other than you two, um, where do you find joy outside of work? Do you have a, hobby or some other things that you like to do with your free time?
Yeah, that's another good question. So I'm a really big outdoors person. I grew up being outdoors a lot and camping a lot with my family and my father, and have continued that. So yeah, hiking, being outside with my wife and my dog is absolutely the pinnacle for me. I think the best thing about it for me though, and I like to do it alone a lot because it's a way to really unplug for me. And it's interesting. It's a combination between kind of clearing your mind, but then having ideas come into your mind because you've cleared it, which
Hmm.
I find interesting. I've come up with some different things while I've been hiking just randomly because I think I was unplugged.
Yeah.
And I think that's important to find something like that in your life where you can get that
Yeah.
kind of effect.
For some people it's painting or doing something else, but the being able to unplug and clear your mind so that you have space for your mind to then be filled with things that you want to fill them with is important. And that sounds like a great way to do it. So,
Great.
okay, one more final question that's related. Is there a particular hike that you've done that was just the most amazing hike that you can point to?
Oh yeah, for sure. We go out to Colorado every year, and there is a hike in Breckenridge that um, has everything.
Mm.
It has trees, it has above the tree line, it has a river flowing next to you, it has a pinnacle that you reach. It's absolutely it's the entire thing. And every year we go out every year and we do that. We do a different, we've never done the same hike twice there except that one
Hmm.
every time. So
Yeah.
that would be it, because of just the wide assortment of things that are a part of it.
Okay. Can you give a shout out to the trail, or would you rather not because you don't want it to get crowded?
Yeah. It's I don't think it's going to get crowded.
Okay.
Probably not in Breckenridge. But maybe there's some folks that go to Breckenridge that are going to ultimately listen to this. But no, it's called Black. It's called Black Rock Falls, and
Awesome. Black Rock Falls. So
and
if you're
so we're going to
listening
be there
and you
in
want a
about a
great
month.
hog,
I don't
yeah,
want people to, I don't want people to be, on that trail that are listening to this, or
right, right.
I'm going to
Go
be
to Black
upset.
Rock Falls, but just don't go that month.
Yes, exactly.
I love it. All
Cool.
right. Well, Dan Csont is the EVP and Chief Marketing Officer for Corpay. Dan, thank you so much. This has been such a great conversation.
Yeah. Thanks, Joe. You take care.